All right. So just to clarify a few things here, if you've listened to the first two episodes of the podcast, we had said that we were going to just record this one next. I will fully admit that's not what happened. What happened was the first one went very long. Thank you to Closer for being an unbelievable co-host. I didn't want to do another one because I was a little upset if you heard it, and we just called it a night. So we taped that on Friday, January 22nd. So we are now on a Wednesday. So if you're looking on the video side and why Closer's wearing a different shirt, why I have a Believe in the Shield WWE shirt, and my background looks different, we did not record after. This is 5 days later. If that means anything, which I don't think it's going to have effect on Closer's story. So I keep saying Closer. Let's start how we're going to start every single episode going forward. And you're going to hear this from a bunch of our guests going forward. When I was growing up, my dad was my Little League coach. He's my Pop Warner football coach. And before every first practice, we'd go around in a circle and ask who you are, introduce yourself to your teammates, and ask what you want to be called. So I'll ask you that. Who are you, and what would you like me to call you during this podcast?
This is like your the first time when you walk into your college class and they ask you who you are, where you're from, why you picked to go here, all this stuff. So my name is Brian Mariano. I'm affectionately called the Closer. We'll get into that story further into the episode of why my nickname is Closer. But yeah, I had the pleasure of working with you. Obviously, the last, God, how long was it? 5+ years at Town Square. So it was not only a fun time where we got to hang out every single day, but obviously we were both doing what we love to do. And obviously now with you and the great success you're having already with the first couple episodes of this podcast coming out, I've been reading the reviews. Obviously, all of them seem very positive, and we're very happy that the first couple episodes were a huge success.
Well, thank you, man. Let's start with this. For those who are not familiar with you, tell us where you grew up. Where you grew up, your first job you wanted as a kid, and if that job when you were a kid is the same job you want when you're 18.
Wow. So I'm from Mechanicville, small town just north of Albany, probably 20 minutes. So obviously you have a lot of people from Syracuse that hang in and listen to the pod. So I'm probably 15 minutes from Saratoga Racecourse. So as you get to know me and Gaz, you know that we're very into horse racing. So job that I wanted when I was a kid, boy, I'll tell you, for me, guys, that's tough because I was always, as you were, kind of a sporting kid. Now, I was known and still affectionately known with my friends as I play a lot of different sports, and some of them, especially in high school, weren't the how would you call it, popular sports. So I didn't play football, I didn't play basketball, I did play baseball, a lot of baseball, and but I play a lot of golf and bowl. So I'm like the oldest 31-year-old that you've ever met.
That's right.
So I did that when I was a kid as well. So when I was younger, I really wanted to try and see how good I was. So ultimately, if you asked me when I was 10, I probably would say I wanted to try and go pro at either one of those sports. That's what the ultimate goal was. And then once you get to, 18 and you're picking colleges and you're like, boy, what do I really want to do? A lot of people don't know this about me. Before I went to school for broadcasting, I actually wanted to go and be a chef. So my uncle owned a restaurant for years on Lansingburg, another small town right next to Troy here in the capital region, and I worked there. And then he moved on to a couple different spots, and I kind of followed him around. And I used to work a lot of those parties, so I was always in the kitchen, whether it was cooking or when we would cater parties. I was the one, manning the grill, and I still will grill even nowadays. We're taping this and it's freezing outside. I'll still be outside trying to grill. So it's always been something that I've been passionate about. But ultimately, when I did work in the industry, I hated the hours. I hated the having to go in at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and certain nights you're not going to get out till past midnight. And it just wasn't something that I was that passionate about to be able to put into that time. So then in high school, a friend of mine was like, hey, they're going to start actually letting us call some of these high school basketball games. And I'm like, wow, that sounds pretty cool. Like, I'm really interested in doing that. So let's give it a shot. And we still have an old picture of me and my friend Dan, shout out to him. And we're sitting there with microphones. You're literally handheld microphones at the top level of the gym. And you're trying to be as quiet as possible, but also try and call the game. So a lot of my friends were coming by. You can hear them like, if I have to find the recording, I have it somewhere, and they're kind of joking with us, like, "Oh, you guys really on the air? You're not really on the air though," but you could hear it, and I got a huge passion for it just by doing that. And now, my friend Dan, he never really was interested in actually being a broadcaster, so he was just trying to have fun with it. And then after calling that game, I was like, "Well, I really like this. Like, I really enjoy being in front of the microphone and being able to call games or be able to just talk my passion, which was sports." So right when I got into college, I was like, "That this is what I want to do." There's no doubt
Okay,
about it.
so you're in college. You are not doing the culinary stuff at this point. You are now going to focus on just being a sports broadcaster. What college are you at this point, and do you transition to another college at some point?
Yeah, so my college was quite interesting the way it was through, because I wasn't. My mother will laugh at me, but I wasn't exactly the best student. I never really put in the effort I think it was necessary in order, and I also wasn't passionate about going in and taking these gen ed classes. Like, especially your last year of high school, you're like, I'm a senior. I ended up going to Hudson Valley Community College right here in Troy, and it was a twofold. One, they had what I wanted to go for, and it was a cheaper option than going somewhere else. I actually did get recruited coming out of high school to go to certain places for golf and bowling, but they didn't have what I wanted to go for. So ultimately, it was just financially, it made a lot of sense. So I go to Hudson Valley Community College for 2 years, graduate there, and part of that was my last semester there. You went to the New School of Radio and Television right here in Albany, and the best part about that experience for me was my GPA that would hover around just enough for you to play sports, because I bowled at Hudson Valley too. I go there and immediately I get a 4.0 for the entire semester, because you get this, you're finally doing what you want to do. And it's interesting because I didn't go for radio. I wasn't going to school for radio. It was more TV based. So I was doing a lot of stuff where shooting packages, going out and doing stuff like that, a lot more behind the camera stuff. And then you would have to shoot your own stuff if you did. So I went from there, graduated, and then went on to St. Rose. And part of that degree program was to go and get an internship. So I got an internship at the local CBS affiliate here in Albany. And shout out to Kelly O'Donnell. He was my professor at New School. He was the one that helped me get the internship. So I was going to our local CBS affiliate at 3 o'clock in the afternoon on Saturdays and Sundays to learn how to be in TV. So I did that for 5, 6 months, whatever it was, to try and get me to that point. And the internship ended, and then I wasn't really sure what I wanted to do. So I'm like, boy, I like TV. It's fun, but I'm not really sure exactly what I want to do. So I'm now working at a Radio Shack.
Yeah,
Right here. Good.
before you go to the radio shack, just two quick things to add there. One, HVCC you're talking about, I think it's a really good lesson for people that Closer mentioned. Financially, that's what made more sense. And if you're a young student or somebody who's aspiring to be a broadcaster, you might not be quite sure what you want to do. If you want to be TV or radio or a writer or streaming podcast, having that experience of at least going to that educational institution to learn about that stuff was a huge boost for you. And just before we go to the Radio Shack thing,
Sure.
Can you mention, just because Kelly is your professor is how you got the internship, or how did the internship come about working with Kelly on the TV side?
Yeah, so that was fun because Kelly was my professor at New School of Radio and Television, and then when we were coming to the end of it and we were going through, and you know this just as well, when you went to college, when you finish broadcasting school, what we call a demo reel. So it's basically just a bunch of different clips of your work and what you learned when you were at that institution. So I'm finishing up my demo reel, and we're in class and everyone's talking to, oh, I'm going to this place, or I'm going to this place to go and get your internship. And Kelly and I were always kind of close because we'd always talked, even after class. So I said to him, I go, Kelly, do you guys have any opportunities at Channel 6, like on the weekends? And at this point, he's there with anyone who pays attention now to ESPN broadcast of college basketball. He's working there with Doug Sherman, who I know is a friend of yours, friend of mine.
Yeah.
And he said, yeah, like, let me just run it by Doug and make sure we're good. And within a week of me graduating, I was right there at Channel 6. So don't be afraid to. A lot of the young broadcasters are always kind of either afraid of their either people they look up to or their professors at their certain colleges, because a I'm not sure how it was at Hobart for you, but a lot of them around here are actual people that are in the industry. So a lot of my professors, whether it was St. Rose, whether it was Hudson Valley or New School, a lot of these people I was learning for were either still working in the industry or had just retired from the industry. So it was really cool to just have that connection right out of school.
So you get out of school, you got a great internship, and you just already teased it. You're back at Radio Shack. What the heck happened, and why are you at Radio Shack?
So,
and for those, by the way, when this is taping, explain what Radio Shack is.
yes, back in the day, guys, you know, the Radio Shack. So they were before Amazon was really becoming a big deal. Like everyone, I know your wife and a lot of people I know as well. Just make sure they have a bunch of Amazon packages right after the Christmas season. But I got a job at a Radio Shack because one of my friends was like, "Hey, listen, I know you need some cash." Like I didn't have a job; I was just going to college. So, and you're commuting to a community college, so I need money. I need money for gas and all these other bills. So I got a job there. After going to school, I'd worked there all the way through school, and my boss was great. I'll give a shout out to Roger because he was awesome during this time. Because there was times where I would just have to call. I'm leaving school, and the only way, you know this feeling too, guys, when you have an interview and you finally got someone that you want to interview, and they say I can only do it at this time, and you're like, no. And you have to move around your schedule. So there was times where I would call him. I'm supposed to be to work at 2:00. It's noon. And I say, Raj, listen, I'm going to be late. Or times where I couldn't even go because I had an interview that I had to tape at a specific time. And he said, I totally get it. I understand. Like, we'll figure it out. So I'm working there. The internship ends. And now I'm like, okay, what do I want to do? Do I want to try? Obviously, media is an industry that there's a lot of turnover. You can have a lot of opportunities to get in or leave because people leave for better opportunities or whatever it may be. So I'm thinking about what channel here am I going to try and get some sort of like producer gig at or somewhere to just get my foot in the door. A friend of mine, Tommy B, was working for Town Square Media. He was the promotional director at the time. And he said, hey, listen, like we're looking for someone to just be a board op. It'll get you in the door. You'll work for ESPN, but you know, obviously you have to work your way up. And I'm like, all right, yeah, give me Armin Williams' number. I said, okay. So I give Armin a call. He's the program director for ESPN at the time. And he had just gotten there. Like I'm talking 3 months prior to him talking to me. So I go in, hey, how you doing? Hey, he breaks down, this is a job you're not going to love. You're going to have to work weekends. You're going to have to work nights. You might have to work very late nights, but we would love to hire you. So that's how I got started at 104.5 The Team. And you're talking 2014 that I'm hired as a board operator, as they call. So my job is to go in and I run the games. I'm the guy that's behind it when you're listening to either Yankee games or anything like that.
Right, Yankee games, NBA, Major League Baseball playoffs. You're on the board. You did not have or did have experience from college running a board.
So I did. When I was at New School, part of a program was to learn every aspect of it, not just to be the one in front of the camera on the TV side, but to try and. So I've seen TV boards more than anything at this point. So when I first go into train to run this board, I look at it and I'm like, whoa, this is like not the same thing that I've been working on for the last year to 2 years. So I'm like, all right, once you get the gist of it down, and most of the people that trained me said, once you understand the idea of it, you're going to get it pretty quickly because TV boards are usually a little more difficult than radio boards to use. So I'm like, okay. And the first game I do, back in those days, I say this as we're very old on this podcast now. We had the local AHL affiliate was the Albany Devils. So just to kind of not get too radio nerdy for everyone on here, some broadcasts are easier to do than others. Some kind of run their own, and you're just basically there to kind of make sure the commercials play. Others you have to actually be a producer on in order to make sure the actual broadcast goes on. So not to go too in depth, but this one for Albany Devils.
I'll sum it up real quick. If it's a locally broadcast, like in Albany, you need someone there. If it's a nationally outside of Albany, it's called what's satellite. So satellite, right. They may do what's called Q, automatically the commercials. Hopefully that's the way to sum it up.
Yeah, so I have to make sure that everything is going right. So now, if you hear, I know we'll get into a lot of like U Albany stuff as well as we continue in the episode. But at this point, I'm the one that's doing, as they call it, the ones and twos back in the studio for our guy Josh Heller, who's calling games for the Albany Devils. Big mistake I do the first broadcast I'm doing. I do the game. We have to dial up as if we're in 1998 to try and connect, but that's a way that the easiest way for us to connect at the time. So the biggest issue here is if you don't disconnect the call after the game and the broadcast is over, the radio station is actually charged for that. So think about you in 1997 and you go on the internet, okay, and you just keep running and you're getting charged every single minute for that to be happening. I have since left. The broadcast is over at 10 o'clock. I am now gone, and I had left that running all night. Needless to say, when I walked into work the next week, Armin was not very happy with me, nor was many others in the building. So that was, I guess, my point of the story is, especially when you get your first job, if you're in media, you will mess up. It happens. You just try to do the best you can to learn and not make it as a gigantic mess up as mine was. So please don't do that.
Yeah, you're a board operator at this point. I believe the staff is about 5 guys who are in this board operator. It's about 5, right, at that point, who are in the combination of this.
Yep.
So for you, what is your goal next? Is it to be a producer? Is it to be the top board operator? Is it to be on the air? Is it to play-by-play? What are your aspirations at this point? And then what happens to kind of get closer to that?
Sure. So yeah, obviously my goal is I want to be on the air. Like I want to be able to have my own show. So I would check in with Armin every month or so. I just walk in the office, hey man, because he by the time I would get there, his show would be ending. So I would go in and I would just try to grab him. Once I got my broadcast on the air and it was working, I just wanted to grab 5 minutes with him and say, hey, listen, just wanted to see what the next step for me is. Obviously, we are pretty set here when it comes to on-air host. And this is even prior to you coming here, is what is that next step going to be? How are we going to get another local show on here? So that's what I kept trying to talk to him about. And he was very honest. And that's one thing Armin, I guess, for me, I'm happy he was, because he just said, listen to me. I need you to be the best board op that I have right now. And then after that, once you become that, then the next step is going to come faster than you think. So instead of it being try and get to that point right now, just try to be the best employee you can be for me now. So that's what I did for the first, I would say, 6 months. I'm doing every game I can. Every game he allows me to do, I'm doing it. So I'm trying to get, some sort of feeling of it. And once I get to that point, he says, okay, now I want you to do as what you had to do for many other ones as well, I want air checks. I want to hear what you sound like on the microphone. And I would send them to him weekly. Here's one. I would do Sports Center updates just on my own. We had the Sports Center music, bed music, and I would just do them, ripping them off one after another after another. And what that did was created that comfort that you could hear. Boy, if I could go back and listen to those right now, my goodness. But you could just sound like you sound so scared because you're trying to sound perfect. And for anyone who hasn't done it yet, or if you're a young kid who's just trying to get into broadcasting, you hear these guys, especially me, you, whoever it is, and they sound like they have all of this energy with just the way that we talk. When you first got on the microphone, at least for me, I was like, okay, this is 104.5, the team. And everything was, there was no energy at all. And like, that was the biggest thing they said to me. And he goes, closer, you're Italian. Talk like you normally would talk. And then it just kind of blossomed from there. So I spent most of that year between board opping and trying to get myself to sound better on the air, that if that next producer role came up, that I was ready. So that was the beginning of it. Then the next step, and you were here for this next step, was a podcast. Because podcasting, as right around that time, really took off. Like everyone was doing a podcast. So find something that you're really interested in. And Armin had then left. I remember talking to you and Levac, same way. Find something that you're really interested in and make it a podcast that it's not the same as you're hearing around here. Okay, I'm into horse racing. Let's do it. So I worked every week to try and make sure that I had a podcast up and tried to get it out as best as I could. YouTube, whatever it may be, that was that next step for me. So that's something I know now a lot of young kids that are either in school or everyone's doing a podcast, and I'm lucky enough to be on yours right now.
What's so smart about this, though, what Closer's talking about is that basically, okay, the producer gig is filled, the on-air gig is filled. I want to find something that can be my niche at the station. I want to make sure that when they're talking on the air about a topic, they go to me and need me on the air and rely on me for information. Maybe not an insider, but you could call yourself an insider as you build with that. Maybe not day one, but like 3 months in, it's like,
Sure.
oh, what is that podcast? The Paddock Pass, which is what it was, right?
Right.
Paddock Pass.
Yep.
Right. So it was on YouTube. And what was even smarter that you did, you undersold yourself a little bit. This is how smart he was. Okay. So what happens is games like the Yankees, the NFL, Major League Baseball, the NBA, because of streaming rights when we're recording, they cannot stream their games. They have their own league set streaming rules. So if you're ever listening online to a game like that, you can't play it online. It's just because of the rules of the league. So what Closer did, he's like, I know we can't have those games on the app during that point. I'm going to put up my podcast. So if someone flips on the game, they'll hear my podcast instead. Genius. So that's what helped your following, is that you had it all over the place. And then even when people weren't looking for it, boom, there it was right in front of you. And it also helped that when track season came around, this is when people became to kind of know you a little bit here, more of a build branding situation, because now you're the horse racing guy.
Right.
You basically made yourself the horse racing guy, and you love horse racing.
Yeah, it was a really easy thing for me because it was something I was doing already. So it was when you came to big race days, Kentucky Derby, or when Saratoga came around, I was already interested in doing that as it is. So now that opens up so much more because I then talked about getting a sponsor. So, hey, we want you to come on the air when we're live at the track on Fridays for one segment, and you can get a sponsor fee and you can find a way to make some cash off of it. All right, let's do it. So now I've evolved from a year prior where I'm just doing games and trying to do air checks to now I'm on my local ESPN affiliate at Saratoga where I'm going to be anyway. So it already had taken off to where I wanted it to be. And then you talk about, we're lucky enough for people, if they were listening to the first couple episodes with you, is the grind of it all. Because it's you hear broadcasters on the air, whether it's anyone, the big timers calling a Super Bowl, or even us when we're calling stuff around the air here in Albany, it takes a lot of time and a lot of effort to do that stuff. So it was grinding to get a sponsor. It was then making sure that you were prepared every single week for anything, and that when your number's called, that you don't take it for granted and you try to take advantage of it. So I used that first summer at Saratoga as kind of how can I get better from here? Because we finally got to where I wanted to be. I'm on the air, but how can we make this bigger? And the next step was I wanted to do this podcast and make sure I had people in the industry that everyone knew to be on the air. So now the grind starts. I'm trying to get guys like Larry Colmus. I'm trying to get Andy Serling. I'm trying to get big time guys from these big racing jurisdictions to come on. And people don't really know this unless you're really in the industry. A lot of people in racing are the nicest people you'll ever meet. And I know we have this stigma of, we're a bunch of degens who like to go to the track and gamble. And you know what? We can be. That's fine. But we are the nicest group of people you're ever going to meet because we want everyone to see what we see in the racing industry, is that it's something that you can go and be the hardcore handicapper like myself or even you, or you can be the one that just to go and hang out and enjoy it and not wager anything. That's something that racing allows you to do. So when I get Larry Colmus on the first time and I ask him, and you hear it a lot on certain stations or podcasts or whatever, I said, hey, can you do the open for my show? And he says, yeah, what do you want me to say? Like right there. I'm like, okay. I go, hey, this is Larry Colmus, voice of, New York racing at the time. And you're listening to the Paddock Pass. And I'm like, oh my God, I just got Larry Colmus to voice the open to my show.
Nice, huge name.
So that was being able to find get a hold of him. It was insane. And you see it now where even if you follow me and my Twitter username underneath there is that I'm like tweeting at people just, hey, can you follow me so I can talk to you and we can try and get on this show? And everyone that I did that to was more than happy to do it. So it just turned into something that I didn't expect it to, but it was so much fun. So it almost didn't feel like I was putting in any work to it. So
Yeah, and that tight-knit community of the racing family. I believe it's the summer of 2016 we're talking about here.
mm-hmm.
Didn't your podcast get a shout out on one of the national racing shows by somebody? Was that same timeline, or am I screwing up my timelines?
No, that's So this is right in the middle of it where I'm tweeting at everybody from TVG, and I start really having conversations with them, how they got started, how they got where they were there, stuff like that. It'd be perfect, obviously, for the theme of this podcast is that it was, how can I get you guys to be regulars here? And then how can I get to where you are? Because that's something that I'm really growing in interest now of what I want to do. So I talked with Todd Schrupp, I talked with Simon Bray, and now they are at Saratoga Racecourse. So I'm finding my time where I'm walking over to their booth, and while they're off the air, we're just talking. And they did everything they could to try and help me and try and set me up to where I wanted to try and jump into this venture. I wanted to try and make this podcast as best as I could so then I could get noticed. So I get Todd on, and this is the time where Paul LaDuca, former New York Met, former Dodger, is with TVG. He's an analyst for TVG. So I get Todd on, and there's rumors that Paul's leaving. He's going somewhere, and we don't know. Okay. So Todd and he's been on the show a couple times, and we've created this kind of bond. And I just said, Todd, listen, I'm a New York guy. I don't want you to divulge any information you can't. But I just want you to talk about your friend. And he goes on for a good 90 seconds to 2 minutes on how close him and Paul were and how he's going to miss him. So I just asked him, I'm going to take a shot in the dark. Is he going to be moving closer to me? Is the question how I phrase it, I believe.
Nice job, closer.
And he says, I would bet a significant amount of money that he will be closer to you than he will to me. So without saying, yes, Paul's now going to come and work for NYRA, he basically tells me this. So I put this online, on YouTube, everything, and it blows up. Like, everyone now is talking about how Paul LaDuca could be coming to NYRA. So the Breeders' Cup retweets it, and then I get a shout out on TVG from Todd Schrupp when the news breaks, and he said, I was on a podcast in Saratoga, and I divulged this information, and he goes, you should go check it out. It's online and blah, blah, blah. And then all of a sudden I look, and the views are just skyrocketing off of this because of Todd having not only the trust, to say something like that on a podcast of at this point, who am I? I'm just a kid in Albany, New York. But to talk about his friend like that and then give me the scoop was amazing. And I can't thank him enough for that. And it just took off all around Twitter and everywhere else. And then all of a sudden now Paul LaDuca is working for NYRA within the next year. So it was great.
It was so cool. And for people who don't live in the capital region, people who maybe not even are horse racing fans, it is a huge deal, Saratoga. It's a national thing. Like, people come from all across the country to see races. So what's happening now is Closer's profile's building. He did it on his own. He got advice from Levac. Paddock Pass is doing great. I'm going to fast forward a little bit for you because this is where some people have some questions. Basically, because you're doing so well, I don't want to gloss over this, but because you're taking off, the fill-ins are happening. Now you're on Big Board Sports filling in. If Roger or Zach are off, you're filling in on Levac and Gaz. You're the number one guy that if anybody's on vacation, they're going to you.
Right.
Now, at that time, you're also producing Big Board Sports, the midday show with Zach, if I'm not mistaken, 10 to noon, right? Okay. So Zach gets a gig in Denver. Zach goes off to 104.3 The Fan in Denver.
Right.
Take us through what happens next. Because if you want to talk about it, you don't have to. This isn't the Can I Ask You About yet, because I got another. Don't worry. I'm going to ask you about Can I in about 20 minutes. But this one, let's go through why Closer's not on the middays.
All right. So that summer happens, and then there's some changes where obviously that second show locally comes in. Roger Weiland comes over. He's now on 104.5 The Team. Zach Bai is his co-host / producer. But they talk about having, the timeline of now back at 104.5 The Team, where I go from board op to now producer. The podcast starts taking off, and then it becomes, well, we need someone else to be the guy in case anyone's off. So they say, listen, we like the way you sound, and we want you to be that guy. Awesome. I'm in. No matter what, if it's morning, afternoons, there was times that year that I did both. You did one show in the morning, one show in the afternoon. It's just the way that it happens. But I'm ecstatic now. I'm finally on the air. I'm doing what I want to do, and the podcast is going well. So Zach comes in one morning and he tells me, "Hey, I'm leaving." And I say, "What? Okay. So what are we gonna do?" And then it becomes I would say the next move for me was I want to be that guy. I want to be that person next to Roger Weiland being on Big Board Sports. So they come in, they say they're going to do an interview process, which is fine. So I interview for the job. I unfortunately don't get it. They do give it to Chris Honorado, which is great. Chris is great. He did a great job and did a great job with that show. So I'm still the main producer. So I'm a little hurt over that because I felt like over that 3+ years, I thought at the time I built up enough to get that spot. But ultimately, I don't really hold grudges. Again, Chris and I had a great relationship. We still do. And I was happy for him. So I continue to do the same thing. Now, what changes here significantly is that I get some help from Roger Weiland. This hire happens. Roger comes to me. This is 2017
Right, yeah.
March. Yep. And he says to me, "Well, Zach's gone. Have you called games before?" So we go back to earlier in the episode. Yes, I have. I did some while I was in school as well. I said, yeah. He goes, "Well, I need someone to fill in and be the guy with me for UAlbany football and basketball." And I said, "I'm in. Let's do it. I'm finally being able to call games, something that I thought I'm just doing in high school where, something might come of it, but I'm just really having fun. And it got me into the career I wanted to go for. But now I'm ready to call games." So that takes off to a whole new stratosphere now because not only am I happy where I am at 104.5 The Team, I'm a little bummed that I didn't get the job that I wanted, but now I'm calling games. So the process of basically Zach leaves to me getting the job with UAlbany with the help of Roger Weiland was tremendous because it's finally something that I want to do. And sure as it comes next year, first game, I'm at Old Dominion in August and been there ever since.
Yeah, so you had to wait basically 6 months because that change happens in March of 2017. You're hired as the new UAlbany football color commentator, basically the number 2 color commentator. We I don't have to explain color commentator, right? That happens in late August 2017. Closer is now a part of the UAlbany broadcast. You follow that football team. It's him and Roger. They're doing games together and everything else. It's a big boost for your career.
Mm-hmm.
Now, basketball for UAlbany is also going to happen. They are scheduled to tip off in November. Take us through what happens where you eventually become the radio voice of UAlbany Great Danes basketball.
Yeah, so originally it was just going to be football. So we had talked about how we were going to do it. And again, it's not easy for, either the universities or the radio stations to put on broadcasts like this. These take a lot of effort. They take a lot of money. So I had told our boss at the time that I will be there to supervise because I know how to use the radio equipment and set it up. So my job was going to be, instead of calling, like I was doing for football, I was going to be almost the studio host, but I was going to be at the arena. So I would do pregame, I would do halftime, and I would do a postgame show. Okay, let's do it. And what we were doing is I would do the show, and then we would take the feed from the television broadcast with Roger. And at the time was actually Jeremy Friel, who was calling games with him. There was a host of different people that were jumping in and doing color for TV. So I get there, set everything up. We're ready to go. All of a sudden, I have nothing. Like, I can't get any of their feed. It's not working. And it's 6:50. And they're doing the taped pregame right in front of me. I hear nothing. I'm like, oh, my God. So I'm in a commercial break. And I get up and I go to the phone. And I call our boss at the time. And I'm like, I don't know what you want me to do.
Not even me, by the way. You're not calling me. You went above me, which is, I think I told you, I'm out of this one. Like, I'm not getting paid yet, man. Call
Right.
somebody above on this one.
Right. So I think I was texting you at the time, and then you
Yeah.
said call, our boss. I said okay. So I call him like, I don't know what you want me to do. He goes, call the game. I'm like, wait, what? He goes, put the headphones on and call the game. And I'm like, okay, let's do it. So I called my first game calling for Albany men's basketball was impromptu.
This
I
is
had to run
unbelievable.
in. I'm texting the producer, the board op back at the studio, and I'm saying, yo, add another minute or two of commercials because I have to run back now and get more notes that I had that I needed to call the game, as opposed to what I had already prepped for the pregame. I don't have. We have cards that we make now that I make for every single broadcast that I do. That makes it easier for me to have it in front of me and reference quickly while I'm looking at the action. So I had to go and grab one of those quickly, and I'm like, oh my goodness, like I've called football games, but basketball is so much faster. So football, because obviously you have one play, you can set it up, and the play happens. It runs at most 10 seconds, and then you can kind of calm down. But now I'm doing it by myself. I don't have Roger Wyland right there with me. I'm calling the game on my own, and it's the first basketball game that I've ever called. So not only am I not as prepared as I want to be, I am nervous. So we call the game, everything goes well, and then I go into the office the next Monday, and hey, we're gonna have you do games. Wait,
Hey.
really? Okay. Like so from now on, I was doing games not only on the road with Roger Wyland, but now I'm also doing them a solo radio call when they have home games. So I'm now ecstatic, and it's been something that I've really enjoyed doing.
Yes, so all good things are happening now. You've now become impromptu, the U Albany Great Danes basketball radio voice. You're doing U Albany football. You're getting some television work for ESPN3. I
Right.
believe January 2018 is when your weekend show Closing Time launches. So now you've got your own weekend show as well.
Yeah, so that was fun because I had talked for a while now because so some predecessors before us, obviously you'll have on the show at some point, I'm sure. Brady Farkas, who's now in Burlington, had a show. He had left to go to Burlington, so he had a Saturday morning show. Zach was doing somewhat of a different show on top of doing Rogers, but then stopped when he was doing as much work as he was for the 5 days a week doing Rogers show. So I go to our boss, I mentioned it to you and to Levac, and I'm like, guys, I'm really interested in trying to do a show on the weekends. And I want to do my own spin on it. And we'll do the horse racing bit where people can not only listen to the podcast, but I can talk about it. So he said, sure, let's set it up. So the biggest thing, obviously, people don't see a lot of what happens in broadcasting. Even when you sit and watch a sporting event on TV, I guess you don't really think about what goes into it. And a lot of it was money. Like, how are we going to pay for you to be there? How is it going to be worthy of not only the station's time or my time? So I go out and I'm grinding, going to places. Hey guys, can you help me out? Can you, find a way to have a couple bucks to broadcast with us and give. So I'm lucky enough that being in a small town like I am, I have relationships with those people that are already in power. So I give them a call and they say, yes, we're in. Let's do it. So I get a couple sponsors, and the next week, closing time starts. It's Saturday mornings, and again, a little different because you're so used to. I was filling in, so I'm so used to prepping a show either with you, Levac, Roger, whatever it may be. I'm used to having that other person to bounce ideas off of, and I'm thinking now, if I can do this, this is going to get me to that next step where now I'm not leaning on anybody on a broadcast. I'm the number one guy. And if I can make this sound good, then maybe that's the next step for me. I can now take control of a show and jump in. So that was kind of the excitement of it when the show launched was one, I want to see how good I really am at doing this. And then can I get better as those weeks went on? So that was always a fun venture, no doubt about it.
I feel like I'm going to group a lot of this stuff into one big topic. And if you feel like I missed something, just
No
spot it. I
problem.
feel like January 2018 to about February 2020, everything's pretty good for you, except you are getting a little frustrated, like other people may, about, hey, I'm taking on more responsibilities. I think financially I should be compensated. Does that sum up the 2 years of that? I don't know if I'm missing something there.
No, that's a good way to describe it. So ultimately, what's happening is I'm obviously happy where I am, what I'm doing and working, but you get for any job, for whether it's media or whatever, you feel like when you put the time in that maybe your time is now up for either a promotion or a step up in pay. So there was multiple times where, because I'm the main producer on the shows and the main producer of the station now, I feel like I should be compensated for that. So there's multiple times where I'm in discussions with the higher ups about, I want to become a full-time producer. I want to get paid for that. And time after time, it's shot down. So yeah, frustration starts to build because I feel like I'm doing everything that I'm asked of, and at certain times more, yet I'm not being paid that way or having that next step come up. So now I'm getting frustrated because ultimately I want to be on the air every day. That's what I want to do. I wanted to have either my own show in a time slot or be a part of one of the shows that we already had. So I'm trying every way now to just think of, how can we do that? To either, how can I get to that next step in a pay bump, or how can I get on the air every day, and probably do both. So now I'm thinking, a lot of things are changing. We're changing lineups on the team. Different shows are coming on and coming off. So I'm looking at a way where I can go to the higher ups and say, guys, we have this opening now. You hear me. You hear what I sound like. When is the next step? And it was always, well, we're not ready for it right now, but it's coming. And it always seemed like it was coming, yet it didn't happen. So the frustration started to build because it just wasn't happening. And every day I'd walk into work and I'm thinking, I still love what I do. I'm just frustrated that I'm not getting to where I feel like I should be at this time.
All right, so let's sit on February 2020. I know we covered it a little bit in the podcast before this. The next questions are both going to be basically, can I ask you these two things? So I'll start here and then follow it up with another tough one. If you ever want to say pass, you get one pass on the podcast is going to be the rule. So,
okay.
So double down here. Can I ask you about February 2020? Do you want to talk about it?
Sure, absolutely.
Okay, go ahead. Take us through your version of what happened.
So I'll never forget it. So, it's crazy. As we just passed the 1 year where we lost Kobe Bryant, I'm actually away talking with friends about these things, about how tough it's been because I'm not getting where I need to go, and I feel like I'm battling with our bosses every week over it. And at this point, my Saturday show's still going, but the sponsorships have stopped. So,
which, by the way, let me stop you real quick. That's not rare in January. When a new year resets, that's very common. January is usually when sponsorships have to be renegotiated. That's very common.
Correct. So I'm still doing that. So I'm in talks with all of those people to try and renew. We actually are away in the anniversary of in the day that Kobe Bryant passed. So I leave, I come back and work the Super Bowl. That next week is Super Bowl week. You guys are away. And Super Bowl week for producers, you guys hear how good Levack and Gaz were on the air, and you heard all of the effort that they put in when they were there, the interviews and everything. But on my end, Super Bowl week is the busiest week of the year. Not only for them being there to do all of this stuff, but for us back at the studio to not only get it on Facebook and Twitter and our website and get blogs for everything for it, to make sure that the show not only sounds great from the time that they're on the air, but that we get as much traction as we can with all of those interviews because people are interested. It's Super Bowl week. And at that point, I'm pretty sure we're all interested because it's another big one with Patrick Mahomes going to be there. So now everybody's interested. So we get through Super Bowl week. Everything's good. We did great. Numbers are good. I walk in on Monday. Do the show with Roger Weiland. I get there like I normally do. We're getting towards the end of the show. It's 11:45. And you come in like you normally do. We would normally talk. People don't know this, but like you would come in towards the end of Roger's show and we would say, hey, listen, like what do you need for me to do to help you guys get ahead, because at that point you don't have a producer on your show. So I would try to get as much stuff as I could for you guys done. And you walk in and you don't say anything, which is very odd for our relationship because we tend to
Talk a lot.
talk a lot, and it becomes pretty, normal. So I turn and I say, what's going on? And you just look down. And because of the events that have happening and the frustration that had built for the last 6+ months, I just say, guys, am I about to be fired? And the look on your face was just of pure sadness and just real shock, because not only are we great friends, we work together every single day, but you don't usually get in an industry that has a lot of turnover. It's hard to build those kind of relationships. So when you have to be the one to come in and then you have boss guys, although I say this to a lot of people now, even though that's the case, before I continue on, I'm like rambling, I know, but you don't get, I never really saw you as boss guys. As much as we always put you that way, and there was that title, and I always wanted to make sure that, you knew that. We were friends, and we are friends. Yeah. So that moment was always, is one, unfortunately, I probably won't ever forget, because not only the 6.5 years that I put into that is about to end, but now I got a really good friend that I've built this relationship with for years, has to be the one to break it to me. So I go in, you say, hey, we have to go down to the boss's office. I said, okay. So I walk in to Roger and Chris, who are in the studio, and I said, guys, I'm probably about to be fired. And he goes, what? And I'm like, I'm going down to talk with the bosses now. I'll let you know. So as soon as I walk in, I'm figuring if our boss, like right above you, is it, maybe I have a chance. But then I walk in and the market president is there. Now I know, and the emotions coming through you is, I'm angry, I'm sad, I'm frustrated. And I've said this before, there was moments where if I didn't have that buffer between you telling me, I would have probably lost it in that office. Because of the amount of built up anger that was coming out of me at the time. So I want to thank you, first of all, for giving me that heads up. Because I think the way that I acted in there was much more professional than I would have if I was just told seconds before by them. Mm-hmm. So the one thing I asked was, is this going to affect me calling games? And they say no. I said, okay. Is there anything you guys need from me? And they said no. So it was very professional when I thought it was going to go down was going to be very bad, because I wanted to say a lot of things that were really bothering me. But at the time, now we don't know that this pandemic is going to get where it is now. We know that it's bad overseas, but we don't know it's bad here. So it was told to me that it wasn't performance based. It was based off of money. Now, whether that's the case or not, I probably believe that. And I know you told me in our previous episode about that, about what was coming up for you, which I knew that you were in line for that. But I didn't think it would have affected us. And honestly, I don't really know if it did or not. So I obviously don't hold that against you. I'm just upset that all of that I pushed for that last 2 years, especially, was for nothing, and the point where they were going to let me go no matter what. So that was a frustrating day for me, because not only is that happening, but I feel like your second question is going to come, what happens after I get ready to leave?
Yeah, so I appreciate you saying all those nice things, man. I know that's a tough story to share because we were both in it together. The second one you don't have to answer, because you are currently doing UAlbany basketball games for ESPN3, your work. I'm just going to toss it out there. Can you talk about what happened with the radio side of it? If you can't, because you're a part of the broadcast team now, you can pass because you're technically doing that job. So again, you can talk about it if you want. If you want to pass, I'll leave that to you.
No, I'll talk about it. There's obviously certain things that I can't divulge, but ultimately what ends up happening is now I'm still calling games for UAlbany. So the season's still happening. I remember the next game I actually was at Hartford and driving out to the game, and no one knew. No, I didn't make this very public. So it's not like I posted it anywhere or anything. So people that I felt needed to know knew, and others I didn't really feel like telling. So I'm calling games, and the season ends. Now I'm looking for, and there's reasons why I
Let me
didn't make this
closer
public.
just real quick. Let me pause you real quick because I think some people are going to get confused about this. So yes, closer is no longer an employee at 104.5 The Team, but his voice can now be still heard on 104.5 The Team. Now, quick tip here. This rarely ever happens. What closer could have easily done is they're giving him a live microphone. He could have easily ripped apart the station if he wanted to because they're giving him a live mic. This doesn't happen ever in radio, but closer, because he's a pro, decides to be a pro and doesn't say anything negative about the station when he's on the air. So that needs to be out there, that's insane that a place that just fired you is giving you an open microphone, but you've decided to be a pro and continue to do your job on that station.
Yeah, not gonna lie, that first game was tough because I'm talking with a producer that is employed at the station that I was just fired and had been producing my games for a few years now. And the first thing he says to me is, "Closer, I'm sorry," and I'm just kind of weird for me to have to like think about it that way. That I'm literally going to be, my voice is going to be on the same station that it was a week ago doing my show, to now I'm calling games on the same network, even though I'm not getting paid by them. Because obviously, the difference is I am contracted through the University of Albany for those games, not through 104.5 The Team. So technically, I can still do that. And it was there. I'm not gonna lie. There was moments where I did want to jump into it, but I felt like that wasn't fair. Not only to you, to Levac, to the people that I still cared about that were working at the station, but it wasn't fair to the university either, because this is their broadcast, and I'm an employee of them at this point. So that not only would make me look bad, but it would make the university look bad as well. And that's not something that I was willing to do. And I don't feel like that was something I think I could have ever done. As ticked off as I was always going to be ticked off outside of the building, and not when I would go into to do a broadcast would I ever try to do something like that. So it wasn't easy, no doubt. There was definitely thoughts of it, but yeah, I end up going in, calling the game, and finishing the season. And ironically enough, right as the season ends, the pandemic of coronavirus hit us.
Yeah.
So it was tough.
Yeah, the world changes after that. I've got 5 questions I want to wrap with, and of course, I'm going to ask my 5 questions, then ask you. One of the questions will be, did I miss anything? Let me start with, let's start with this because I think I'm leaving something hanging here.
Okay.
Did I miss anything I should ask you about now before we get into our final 5 questions to wrap this up? Did I miss anything that you want to talk about? What should I ask you as I'm calling this segment?
The only thing I didn't really go into was how close a lot of these was. So when the summer was happening, when I was doing the podcast and everything for horse racing, so this is before obviously the UAlbany stuff really gets going, and I'm in like serious talks with like higher ups of networks to try and go work for them. So whether it was talking with certain people at Naira, talking with people at TVG, I'm trying to now, because my frustration has built to where it was, that I'm ready to, I love talking about horse racing. So let's go. Let's try and find a place that we can make that happen. So there was talks of trying to move and relocate. And then there's talks of trying to stay here. If there was a way I could help out during the Saratoga meet, something like that. So unfortunately, none of those talks really came to fruition because either the pandemic hit and it made it even worse for people to having to try and hire, even though racing did happen as much as we went through this year with, Saratoga happening and the Kentucky Derby and everything like that. It was just, it's like everything else where places aren't making the money that they expect because of there not being any fans. So it makes it difficult for companies to try and hire in that. And I get that. So the last year has been kind of just weird for me because I'm like stay-at-home dad, where I'm just kind of sitting here and I'm not really doing anything. So the summer was great because my golf game was pretty well on fire. So I was playing 4 or 5 times a week. But yeah, I'm ready to get back out there. I think that's news that'll be coming soon, hopefully.
Very cool stuff, man. All right, so let's get into these 5 questions. Question number 1, I probably should have covered this at the start of the show. People are probably asking this through 55 minutes. Where did the nickname Closer come from?
There it is. I figured that was coming too. So when I first got hired, Armin Williams is the program director. Okay. And he hears my name, Brian Mariano, and he's like, Mariano, huh? So all of a sudden I'm working, like I'd come in early to do games. So I'm doing whatever game that starts at 7:00, and Armin and Levac is ending. So I'm in there in the studio with him. And, Levac would always tease me because I would come there with something to eat because I'm going to work there for 3 hours. I haven't had dinner yet. And Levac's like, I've been sitting here for 4 hours talking, and I'm now hungry, so thanks to you. Armin would do the same thing. So all of a sudden, he just rips off like, hey, Closer. And I'm like, you talking to me? They go, yeah, well, Mariano Rivera, the closer for the Yankees at the time. So Mariano Rivera, with my last name, he correlates into just calling me Closer. So now, the last 3+ years that I'm working for this station, I am not known ever. No one ever says the name Brian. It is Closer. Even our bosses, when they call me Closer. It was amazing how that took off from just a correlation of the greatest closer of all time, in my opinion, playing with the Yankees, to now my last name being his first name. So that came from Armin Williams.
Yeah, very cool. And I don't know if Armin did this on purpose or not, but you also were closing out the night. So, like, you were the one running the broadcast.
Right.
So you technically, if your voice was on the air, you'd be closing out 104.5, the team, similar fashion to Mariano Rivera.
That's
All right, very,
right.
very cool there. This is for the Syracuse people. What's up with Craig Forth? Is there a Craig Forth connection with you? Explain the Craig Forth
Oh,
connection.
man. Yes, Craig Forth, being from Mechanicville, graduated from Mechanicville High School, haven't left the area. So he comes back and is an administrator. And all of a sudden, I'm like talking to, I think I went to one of the high school games here in Mechanicville, and I walk in, I'm like, wow, who is this tall guy? Like, oh, he's the new, like, assistant principal. I'm like, oh, that's pretty cool. Oh, yeah, his name's Craig Forth. Wait, what? And I'm like, oh my God. So I go over and I'm talking with him, and I'm like, wait, you're seriously the Craig Forth that played at Syracuse, right? He's like, yes, I am. I'm like, oh my God. So he's the assistant principal at the Mechanicville Middle School. And I'm like, now granted, God knows this, I'm a big Duke basketball fan. So we had a lot of, to the point where we went back and forth. Sorry, Syracuse people that are listening to this podcast. But there was times where I would joke with you, and I got you one time. I don't think I'll ever forget this. I think you might have forgotten it, though. You left your office at one point and left your computer open. So I changed the background on his computer, which was something to do with Syracuse at the time, and made it the championship photo of Duke when they won in 2015. So, yes, but Craig Forth is a local connection now because he is an assistant principal at the high school that I graduated from.
Love it. The big man.
That's right.
I don't even want to say this one out loud. I just want to see your reaction. Can we go ahead? If you're watching on the YouTube side, it says Andy Serling interview story. You and I are a part of this. Let's tell this story because it never aired. And I think it's one of our favorite never aired cuts on 104.5 team. I'll let you take the lead on this, and I'll stop you if I think we're going the wrong way and how we feel about it now years later.
Okay. So, a lot of what we had to do interview-wise, we couldn't do it live, so we'd have to tape. So we're taping this interview earlier in the afternoon. That's going to run later in the afternoon. So Andy Serling's joining us, and we're going to
real
talk
quick
about...
for those who don't know who Andy Serling is. He is a NYRA handicapper.
Yes.
So if you ever go to Saratoga, Andy's got the glasses. You see him on the broadcast. That's Andy Serling. He's a handicapper of races.
Right. So he gets paid by NYRA to handicap the races. So he comes on every week with us, and we talk about what's coming up next that week. And right now we're on the Kentucky Derby Trail. I believe it was like March or April, something like that. So I start asking him about something that's happening. Now, I have knowledge of people that I trust that tell me that Saratoga, for people that don't pay attention to horse racing, Saratoga would usually run, it used to be a month, now it would be 6 weeks, where they'd run 6 days a week, and they would have one dark day, as they call it, which would be Tuesday. They wouldn't race. So I have pretty good contacts that tell me that this is going to change, and it's coming. Like, they're going to announce it. This is going to be the last year without it happening. So Andy comes on. We go through most of the interview that we want to ask.
No,
So
no, 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 no. You lying son of a gun. That's
okay,
not
so
true. That's the
so
second question you asked him in the interview. That's the second question out of the
so
gates you
we're
asked.
talking before the interview, and I go, guys, like I need to ask him this, like because
Okay,
I'm gonna go
fine.
with it. Like
Yes,
I'm ready to write. I'm gonna
yes,
write the article and put it up on 104.5 The Team. That breaking news:
yes,
Naira is going to change the schedule of Saratoga. So I
yes.
want Andy Serling to answer this, so I can actually get somebody to tell me that this is going to be the case, other than what my source is. So the second question, I ask him, and I say, Andy, so there's talks now, obviously, with Saratoga could be going to a 5-day racing, calendar as opposed to the 6 days. Um, do you know if that's coming anytime soon? And if, I don't think I phrased it exactly like that, but it was something to the point of, I just want to hear what he has to say. So all of a sudden there's silence. Like nothing is said for a good 4 or 5 seconds. And then all of a sudden he goes, Brian. And I go, Andy. And then he loses it. Like he goes, feels like that we're putting him in a spot where, he shouldn't have had to answer that. That's something that should have been. And obviously looking at it before now, the way that I see it, I probably should have asked someone else at Naira, not Andy. So, Andy, if you do come over this and you want to listen to this episode and you've gotten an hour in and you hear this story, I'm sorry that I put you in that position, but you are the first Naira person we were going to have on the air when I had this news. So I gave you the opportunity. What ends up happening is he ends the interview. So we have to retape from there, and we do the rest of the interview. He does it professionally, answers the questions, and then leaves. So now we take the headphones off and look at each other and go, how long do you think it's going to take before our boss is walking through the studio door? As opposed to, it couldn't have been maybe 3 minutes. And I think you called him just to give him a heads up from the studio and
The
said, hey,
boss.
listen,
Yeah.
yes, our boss, he calls and says, hey, listen, you're going to get a call from Naira, just letting you know. And this is what happened. So he comes down, we talk about it, everyone's upset. But the idea was to get Andy Serling to either say yes, and all he had to do, and I guess this is where I got upset, and I've talked with other people about this too. All he did have to say was no comment. Like, I don't comment on that. And then we move on. And I accept that as an actual answer. But he got so upset that he wanted to end the interview because I put him and blindsided him in a way. So it almost convinced me that I was right.
Yeah, and two things to add to that. One, closer asked that question, and then I followed it up with this also happened like they canceled
Right.
the track at like 5 o'clock. Like something happened at Belmont that day where basically like they had to pause the races, and I actually didn't know what had happened because Andy was there.
Yes.
I actually like asked him like, "Hey, why'd they pause the races? Something to do with
Right.
heat or something, or they let fans in?" And like closer said, horrible job by both of us. This would be like, I guess, a bad example, but I think sports fans will understand this. Stanford Steve or the Bear, like guys who were known as sports wagers or gamblers, that'd be like asking them, what about the ESPN layoffs from the last year?
Right.
And you'd be like, dude, I'm the betting guy.
Right.
I can't. Andy's the betting guy. Now you're right. The fact that we were offered someone who worked for Naira when Naira was in the news and that was the representative they gave us, we both had the same mindset of, hey, this person works for a company that's about to have a breaking news. He probably shouldn't be on with us this week. I would personally say if I'm an SID or a public relations person or somebody like that, maybe I would have just backed off that week and not put him in a bad position. But also there's faith of like, hey, our partner is not going to put him in a bad position. We did screw that up. Sorry, Andy. We were trying to do young broadcaster things that we thought was going to be good for the interview and everything else. So we screwed that up. Sorry. And Andy's awesome. I love him. He's hilarious. I probably would have done the same thing if I was Andy because we were recording. He's like, let's just do another interview because I'm not putting this one out.
Right. And yeah, and honestly, doing it quickly before I know we got to move on here, but that was something that I look back on multiple times. And yes, I put him in a bad position. I see that now. But I was coming off of the high, too, of having that Todd Schrupp interview that blew up. So I'm like, when you have a story and you know that, like when you know you have it, that you need to go with it. And sure enough, it comes out that they were changing the schedule. And now, for anyone in Syracuse who doesn't follow horse racing, I just want to gloat just for that 1 second because I did have that one.
Yes, he scooped it, man. Closer had to bury that story. I'm telling you, if you're a Capital Region sports fan and you knew that Saratoga news, Closer had that for months. and we can never put it on the air. So there you go. You well-deserved gloat, and there you go. There's a nice little secret. Closer had that Saratoga story for months before it happened. Two more here for you. We're talking a lot of horse racing right now. For non-horse racing fans, best advice for them to win cash if they go to the track and having fun.
First one is to know your limits. Know what you're willing to lose, because a lot of people, and for anyone who's coming from out of town, obviously you go to a place, you're there to have fun. So you probably bring extra cash. It's like when you go away, you go to a casino. If you're in Las Vegas, you bring extra cash because you're going there but know your limits. Know we kind of joke with it in some of my inner circles. Know what you don't know, because what happens is people will tell you to do certain things or to have this kind of insider look or not. If you're going there to have fun, go have fun. Bet $2 to win or $2 to show, something to where you're going to not lose a lot of money. You might not make a lot of money, but you're there to have a good time and have a good experience. So if it's someone who's just going there to have fun, just bet $2 and know your limits. If you're going there to try and make money, I would not leave the house. Don't go, because it's very hard to make money doing it. But I would say the way that I look at it is I have a certain amount that I'm looking to invest, and I will try and calculate how much my tickets that I'm going to play could pay out and if it's worth that. So I put a certain amount of time in that if I know I'm going to wager $100 or $200, I need to know that the wagers that I'm placing are going to make that kind of money, or at least in my mind, I try to double that investment.
Final two questions here. Best advice for people listening to get where you are, to get where you've been, to talk horses, to work in your hometown market, and make sure you plug all those social media accounts so people can win some money coming up here in the
summer. So if you're watching, you see at the bottom of the screen. If you're listening, it's at Mariano_closer on Twitter. And honestly, for me, when you look at least handicapping and that way of looking at it, you want to try and find ways that you can make money in. I'm like kind of rambling here because I had a thought and it's now gone, and it's the worst feeling in the world when you're.
No, I'll stall for you then. Okay. While you're thinking, don't forget to download the Getting There with Guys podcast on Spotify, Apple, Facebook, and YouTube, and follow Closer on Twitter at Mariano_closer, where you can get his tips for racing.
Right. So yes, that's good. That's good. I got it back. I got it back now. So not only if you want to get into the racing world, just talk to people, talk to me. You can reach out to me if you want. Don't stop working, or don't be afraid to try things. So, for example, the podcast idea never came to my mind until you guys suggested it. And because of that, I have now connections in the racing industry that I never thought I would have. I got the ability to get on the air more often, which then helped with certain situations happening that I'm now calling games for you, Albany. So for young people to try and get to this point, don't stop trying new things. Try to find your niche and what you like to do. And whether it's like you have now, guys, starting this podcast is tremendous to be able to go out and be seen and talk to people. Don't be afraid to reach out to people, because a lot of people in this industry will be more than happy to help you out. So if you're a young broadcaster, whether it's reaching out to someone like me or guys, or if you're reaching out to someone even bigger, don't be afraid to do that, because we always just said rather ask forgiveness than for permission. So if you talk to somebody and they don't want to talk to you, you just say sorry. But if you just sit there and don't reach out to them, then you have no chance of that happening. So don't be afraid to try new things, one, and don't be afraid to reach out to people in the industry, because you'll be surprised at how much they are willing to help you.
Closer, we've had a long conversation over 3 episodes. We filled up the first week. I could not have done this without you. Looking forward to talking again very soon, my friend. Thank you for the help early on. Thank you for sharing your story, and we'll talk again soon, and hopefully we'll hit a trifecta soon at Saratoga.
No doubt, man. I appreciate you having me be a part of this, especially those first couple episodes. You're a true friend to me in this industry, and honestly, I hope for not only great things for you in this podcast. It's been phenomenal to be a part of the first 3 episodes, but I appreciate you having me on here to try and tell my story as well. So hopefully, we'll definitely catch up soon. There'll be many of drinks to be had and trifectas to be hit, no doubt.
Bring back the paddock pass. All right, catch you later, dude.
All right, buddy. We'll see you.
Yeah.